All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Drones Down Under podcasts. Again, we've got Aaron jumping on board for this evening, another as a guest host. And Aaron is the director of Oz Aerial Media. And tonight he's going to run us through something he's pretty specialized in doing aerial time lapses and time lapses in general.
Yeah.
This topic kind of excites me a little bit. I like time lapses. I've played around with them, but definitely haven't made anything super special. So it'd be interesting to hear what you can bring to the table here, Aaron.
Well, thanks, Ty. Yeah, look, I mean, time lapses is something I got into as a photographer and a videographer, ground-based, and then moving into the drone world, probably 6-7 years ago. Really saw the possibility of intermixing the ground-based video with the aerial video, and what better way to do that is over a period of time. And one thing that I figured just through, learning and researching and listening to podcasts like this, and I learned how to automate the drone so it would fly the same path over and over again, capturing exactly the same thing. And then I thought, well, and this is not an original thought, there's, other people doing it, but I thought, well, how can I put that into my business? And construction and demolition and building, any sort of, residential, commercial, that sort of stuff really has that aspect of showing progression over a period of days, weeks, months, years. And having a drone be able to go to waypoint 1, hit that point, put the camera in exactly the same spot, start recording, fly to waypoint 2 at the same angle and record exactly the same flight path over and over and over again, as many times as you want to. I sort of went, well, this is great. I can go to a construction site where there's nothing. It's a vacant paddock. So you film a flight path and you go, all right, well, that's going to be my flight, a circular flight around where this thing is going to be built, whether it be a building or a statue or whatever. And then you go back there and they've cleared the paddock. You fly it again. You go back there and let's say it's a building. There's a concrete slab down. You fly it again. First floor, frame, roof, second floor, flight. And those flights are exactly the same each time, which then allows you to layer that in your editing program, in your video editing program. So you can actually then just easily put a transition between them, compress them to whatever time you want. If, let's say the flight's 2 minutes long, you might only want a 1 minute photo, so you speed it up. 1 minute video, so you speed it up. And you can then show the building being built in a singular flight path around the building.
I suppose you, with photography history too, you use a bit of ground base as well. So I imagine you're combining that along with the drone footage to obviously extend that time period out of the video itself.
Absolutely, yeah.
To add a different interest point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So for some of the work that I do put ground-based time-lapse cameras on poles or, in higher locations. I put one at a demolition site up a 30-meter flagpole, but I could only get a 15.
Use a drone to fly it up, or?
Yeah, well, we thought about it, but it was this huge flagpole. We could only get a 15-meter high Manitou to get me up there. So screwed the time-lapse camera into this flagpole and broke about 8 screws getting it in, because I hadn't really factored in the flagpole would be 2-inch thick aluminium. Should have known, but I got it in there.
That's all that matters, Aaron.
Yeah, exactly. So then, the camera sort of stayed up there, and that recorded a ground-based time lapse, which we then interlace with the aerial time lapse that we fly around it as well. And the results are great. You can see a progression of a demolition or a construction, and in some cases, I've actually done residential demo and then construction of the new property on the same site. So the time lapse itself is from tearing the old house down, completely vacant block, new house build, and finished sort of.
So you'd be capturing these over probably like a likely number of months, and so you obviously have some that are sitting there stationary, and you probably go to site for what, maybe an hour or two at a max, every couple of days or once a month, or.
Yeah, look, depending on the project, residential builds, and let's face it, through COVID and the weather that we've been having here, I'm based in Sydney. Through COVID and weather, the projects have been creeping a little bit.
It's the whole East Coast for weather.
Yeah, but effectively, if you're talking a residential build, you're probably looking at 10 to 12 months. Commercial build, realistically, anywhere from 1 to 2 years, depending on the size and complexity of the build. But you've got to remember with the time lapse, especially the aerial time lapse, they're condensed a lot in the first, let's say it's a 2-year build for a construction site, shopping center, for example. Mm-hmm. The build itself happens in the first 12 months. The big things that you can see from the air happen in that first 12 to 15 months sort of thing. And then for the last 6 to 8 months, they're doing fit out. They're doing, bathrooms or, tiles. The drone can't see that. So you tend to do more flights at the beginning, less flights at the end, because there's not a huge amount of change happening. Once the gardens or car parks or that sort of stuff go in, then you do another flight. But your flights are more condensed at the beginning of a build, and then they sort of stretch out as the internal work starts.
Have you combined doing any internal time lapses for builds yet?
Yes. So for construction work, we'd sort of focus on having a ground-based time lapse set up for the build. And then once they sort of get it to lock-up stage, or, a point where not much is happening outside, we'll move the time-lapse camera internally to somewhere that's nice and open and will stay open. And then see an internal construction happening as well. And it doesn't really matter because, the ground-based time lapse is probably taking a photograph every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, over a period of 5 months, 6 months, 7 months.
Well, I was going to ask you what your intervals were. So
yeah.
So you have to actually plan this with, say, the construction companies that say, okay, what's the timeline build? What, would you see renders or blueprints of some sort to be able to know where the camera has to be? And
100%. One critical point with that is you've got to know what the final build will look like. So let's say you set up a camera angle of a construction, that's a house, and you frame it so that, there's the vacant block, because that's all you're looking at when you start, a vacant paddock or a block or, nothing. But if you don't figure out the final height line, if you focus it for a 1-story and it ends up being a 2-story, you're actually going to crop out the top of the house by the end of the shot.
So you've just lost 6 months worth of work just because you didn't plan it. Oh.
Working with the project managers and working with the construction team is critical. You've got to know what it's going to look like at the end, how high it's going to be, if it's going to be a 6-meter height or a 12-meter height or 3 stories or 10 stories or whatever, so that you can factor that in before anything's even there. And look, there's always project creep. There's always scope creep. Things change. It's going to happen. Yeah. But as long as you've sort of come back enough and sort of factored that in at the beginning, then that's a really key point with aerial time lapses. You've got to know what the finished product's going to be.
It's the planning. I mean, we know that all of us in all the work we do, planning is paramount. But I imagine in particularly time lapse, and especially construction, the planning, it has to be pretty to the point, and obviously, allowing for variations and changes as well.
Yeah. So what do they say? Measure twice, cut once.
Yes,
very true.
Same thing. Like you got to work with the project team. You got to have that relationship, sort of being able to call. Weather comes up, you planned a time lapse on Wednesday, and it's like, it's raining.
Yeah.
For a build, it doesn't really matter. Oh, well, the slab's going down. Yeah, well, the slab will be there tomorrow. It's okay. I'll just have to juggle it and plan it.
So with the weather that's been happening throughout Sydney and the whole East Coast for the last 6 months, has that affected you too much, or you sort of around it?
100%. Like the projects, they've been pushed back. So fortunately, most of the projects that I'm working on are bigger sort of construction, and there's ground-based time lapses capturing it. Look, the time lapse cameras are capturing a lot of nothing happening. But you can just chop that out in the final edit, and it doesn't really matter. You can't fly in the rain. It's just that simple. So you've just got to juggle that around and be flexible. Being able to be flexible, going out and, doing the flights when you can.
That's the drone industry in general, isn't it? Being flexible.
Pretty much. You get 2 weeks of raining and it's 1 month of very busy.
Go.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I guess we had to sit there. What are some of the bigger projects that you've done, Aaron, that you shot that you're pretty proud of, I guess? Like, I mean, I know the one I saw just recently you did with the demo and the FPV through the demo, that blew my mind. I was
freaking epic.
Really into it.
That one's actually not even complete as of recording this, which is, early July in 2022. So yeah, the time-lapse cameras are coming down. The ground-based time-lapse cameras are coming down this week. But that particular project was a very large warehouse that's being demolished to make way for a new subdivision sort of thing. And what I wanted to do there was actually get FPV drones flying through the warehouse, because it's a big space, it's huge space, and it went from office space to warehouse space. And it's like, well, I want to fly through there. Can I just knock those windows out? And they're like, yeah, no worries, do what you want, So we just tore the windows out.
That's brilliant.
And we could literally fly up the staircase. It's like, guys, everybody get out. Everybody, clear the area. We made it safe. We made it sort of okay. We planned the flight path. And, we could put an excavator where we wanted to. So we could fly under the arm of the excavator and then up the stairs and then through the office out into the warehouse area. And then around a big crane hook that was there. So having the FPV capability indoors gives it this extra dimension, and then the ground time lapse is capturing the building sort of being pulled down over, I think it was a 6-week period. And then the aerial, which we haven't actually done aerial time lapse, we've just done aerial fly arounds to capture, as it's happening, supplements that to create this story, or multiple stories in this case, because we're going to use the FPV footage. And it's fun. I find it fun anyway. But the footage that you can get is really interesting. You can't really do that on residential sort of stuff. You can't do it on construction so much, because there's a lot of people working there that, they're building, and they're on timelines. They're on tight timelines. But with demo, you can kind of get away with it a bit more, because you just go, guys, clear out for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Go to your smoko. We're going to do the fly through during your smoko. So there's no one there. And, you can sort of get some great stuff.
So even with the aerial time lapse, I mean, I suppose when you're doing building sites, you would have people present and around. So is that sort of something you've got to mitigate a bit, where you're going there, obviously when the site's shut down, or are you doing it more just out of the area of the workers? And
generally, I find that we're not flying directly over the work site anyway, because you're coming at your oblique, your 45-degree angle to sort of capture a circular path around the site. Yeah. So the only time that you'd ever do a situation where you would be flying over the top of the site is if you want to do a top down. And in that case, again, you've gone to the site, you've probably signed in. Most of the time you're wearing PPE, so you got hard hats, boots, all that sort of stuff. You've spoken to the site manager. Hi, we're on site. We're going to set up over here, that sort of stuff. They're aware. You've got your comms running with them. Okay, guys, look, we're going to do the top down now. Can we have 3-minute window where we can put the drone up? And they're very flexible with that sort of stuff, because the construction company that they work for is sort of wanting this done. So yeah.
So plus communication is like key, essentially, of everything you do.
It really is. Having that communication with the site team, the project managers, you really need to have that in order to get
it's necessary.
the results that you want. Plus, most of the people on site love seeing what's coming out of the drone anyway. So,
they see a drone and they're like, "Oh, how hard does it go? How fast does it go?"
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
it's the 10,000 questions for the people.
Yeah. Get the answers printed on the back of the shirt, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you can buy them off eBay.
I think you can actually. Yeah. 120 meters, 70 kilometers an hour.
I need one of those on an A-frame just to take to jobs all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, was that, I guess, project one of your favorites, or is there something that you've had that's real standout that you really, in time lapse wise, particularly something that was really stand out that you enjoyed and
that particular project, which will be coming out in the next month or so, is one of my favorites just because of the FPV component. I did do a project that I mentioned earlier that was from demolition of a residential site to the rebuild of 2 townhouses on the site. And the demolition company asked me to do the demo of the site, but then the construction company saw the demo time lapse and said, all right, well, let's do it again for the construction. So for me, it was kind of nice to be able to see it from this old red brick, 1950s house to this beautiful new twin modern townhouses that have been built, and to get the footage going from excavators tearing it down and filling in a pool to this beautiful 2 new townhouses.
And I imagine it'd be quite satisfying too when you spend so much time capturing with time lapse to actually put it all together in the end and see the end result.
Yeah. I think the total, that was about 17 flights over a year and a half.
How many images?
Well, see, this is the thing. I record video.
Oh, you
so
do?
I record video. Well, I record video, but then I always do a photographic flight as well.
Okay.
Just because I'm like you, Ty, overshoot, Yeah. So I'll do a video flight around, and then I've duplicated that flight to do a photograph every 1 second. And generally they're about a 2 to 3 minute flight time. So, you get 120 to 200 odd photos. So if something went wrong with the video, you can make it up with the photos.
Yeah, you've got the backup.
And you've got that backup. But I very rarely use the photos themselves.
Yeah, okay.
All about the video file. But yeah, they're probably my 2 favorite ones for time lapse. I really, really enjoyed them.
Yeah, okay.
I can't wait to get that FPV footage out.
Make sure we'll share that on all the socials as well.
Yeah,
definitely.
When Aaron's put that up and finished, and I think there's actually some snippets of the FPV I think you did share on Facebook. We'll share them on our socials for DDUP and let all the listeners have a look, because I tell you what, it's some incredible footage.
It's up on it's up on Oz Aerial Media's YouTube channel as well, so you can check it out now.
Yeah, cool.
That's just the teaser, but there was a bit of a snafu with the site. They found a bit of asbestos, so there's been a little bit of a delay. We're hoping to have it finished by now, but that's what happens in demo.
Nothing happens on time. We all know that.
No.
Probably just to touch on it as we come towards the end of the episode, just probably a little bit of a rundown of some of the different equipment, because I know you use ground-based, you use drones, you obviously use little ground-based cameras you have mounted on poles, etc. So probably just a little bit of a rundown on some of the different stuff that you use and what they are, basically.
So look, anything you've got. I use anything from GoPro Hero 8s, which I have 2 of. I use time-lapse cameras that I hire from an organization, and they provide me with the camera in a sealed box with solar panel and 4G and website and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And then at the end of it, they're the ones that I'll mount long-term, 12 months sort of thing. Yeah. For the aerial time-lapse, which I think is where we really want to be, I use Litchi, which is a flight app that allows you to automate your flights. Yeah. So you can set a flight path and you can then predetermine it, height, camera angle, all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then whatever drone is compatible with Litchi at the time of listening, watching this podcast. So I currently use a Mavic 2. Not the Mavic 3 or the Mini 3.
SDK not out for either of them.
Yep, can't use either of those. So I use my my old workhorse, the Mavic 2 Pro. which is just the old faithful and just
still has an amazing camera. That thing
doesn't skip a beat. I think
I've come so close to buying one still just for that camera.
Like to get it
cheaper these days as well.
Yeah, you won't be disappointed. I've kind of said I'll go to the grave with that one, I reckon.
Yeah.
They can sort of just put it in there with me. I love that drone, always have.
It's amazing that DJI hasn't replicated that Hasselblad camera onto their newer drones. It's stunning. There's no other way to put it.
So good. So yeah, I run that through Litchi. Generally, the first flight you go out, you've got to do a bit of tweaking. You go out, you set your camera angles, you fly it, and then you let it do an automated flight, and you look at the footage and you go, oh, that's not right. It's jumping here. So you make your fine tune adjustments in the app, or that's too high, that's too low. Fly it again. It's getting better, but I still want to sort of tweak this. Yeah. So generally, you'll probably do 3 or 4 flights the first time. But then once you've got it nailed, you turn up on site, you sign in on site, you put your gear on, you make the site manager aware that you're there, turn the drone on, get it. I always fly it to waypoint 1. I don't just turn it on and go play. I always manually fly it just behind waypoint 1, hit play, does its flight, go to the photo mission, hit play, does its flight, and drone.
Yeah, awesome.
It's, makes it so easy once you've got that repetition going. So yeah, and then you just work on the people skills sort of thing at the end.
Yeah, awesome.
So yeah, really but that's the main products that I'll use. And then just interlacing that with ground-based video if they want it. Sometimes they want a walkthrough of the final product. So you just use ground-based video cameras or still cameras. And I'm a Canon user. It's good. Yeah, I know, right? I knew I liked to talk.
We're few and far between these days.
So yeah, all the Sony purists out there, and I think there's a few Nikon users still out there, floating around.
Yeah, there's some of them.
I
know a few.
The dark side.
Well, if any of the listeners have any questions for Aaron, particularly on time-lapse, I'm sure he'd be willing to answer them. All of us are always quite willing to answer questions from our listeners and give them a help out on anything they need. So definitely make sure you swing Aaron a message or swing us a message, and we can pass it on to Aaron. But with that, we'll wrap up this episode, guys, and that's been some great information. I actually learned a lot there as well. So
cool.
Thank you for your time, Aaron. And
welcome, guys. Welcome, Ty.
Thanks, guys. And
thanks for joining us, Aaron. Have a good one.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Gotcha.